Shaima Alawadi, a young mother of 5, beaten to death in her home in California. According to a note left at the crime scene, she was attacked for being a Muslim. Trayvon Martin, a black teenager shot dead by a neighbourhood watchman in Florida as he made his way home. He was followed as suspicious for wearing a hooded sweatshirt, but was armed with nothing more lethal than a packet of sweets and a can of iced tea. These two separate tragedies have once again shone the spotlight on race relations in the United States. In the Obama era, it's been easy to think that racism might be part of America's past. Do these incidents tell us something different? Hello and welcome to Eyewitness. I'm John Rees. The reluctance of the authorities to act and arrest Trayvon Martin's shooter, who claimed to be acting in self-defence, has provoked nationwide outrage and mass demonstrations. The crowds now look set to be joined by Muslims who say they are also subject to increasing racial prejudice. Alex Crutcher reports.
An alcohol woman is
beaten and left for dead in her home. Shaima Alawadi was barely alive when her 17-year-old daughter Fatima returned from school to find her mother unconscious on their dining room floor. Beside her was a note which read, "Go back to your own country. You're a terrorist." She died in hospital this weekend. Speaking to US media, Shaima's daughter had this message for her mother's killers.
We're not the terrorists. You are. Whoever did it. We don't know what color you are, but we do know one thing. You are not Christian, you're not Muslim, and you're not Jewish. You're someone without a religion. Because if you know God, you would know God would not accept that. You're an animal, whoever you are.
Shaima moved to the United States in 1993, and her death has stunned the El Cajon neighbourhood in which she lived, home to one of America's largest Iraqi communities. Her killing has also added fire to the wider debate around Islamophobia and racism in the United States. Campaigners have explicitly linked Shaima's death with the case of Trayvon Martin, the teenager who was shot dead by a neighbourhood watchman in Florida last month. Their names have been trending together on Twitter, and 2 items of the victim's clothing have come to symbolise the stigmas attached to both America's black youth and Muslims: Shaima's hijab and Trayvon's hoodie. Here, in a debate on Fox News, Geraldo Rivera says that Trayvon's hoodie was as much responsible for his death as his shooter.
I think the hoodie is as much responsible for Trayvon Martin's death as George Zimmerman was.
What do you mean?
When you see a kid walking, Juliet, when you see a kid walking down the street, particularly a dark-skinned kid like my son Cruz, who I constantly yelled at when he was going out wearing a damn hoodie or those pants around his ankles, take that hood off. People look at you and they what's the instant identification? What's the instant association? It's those crime scene surveillance tapes. Every time you see someone sticking up a 7-Eleven, the kid's wearing a hoodie. Every time you see a mugging on a surveillance camera or they get the old lady in the alcove, it's a kid wearing a hoodie.
Martin was carrying nothing more lethal than a packet of Skittles when he was shot by George Zimmerman, and the initial reluctance of authorities to act has provoked further outrage. Protests have been taking place across the United States. Even Martin's lawyers donned their hoodies in court. Facebook pages are now calling for crowds of hijabis to join them in the streets. This, they hope, will draw attention to the racial prejudice and stereotyping they see as endemic in American media and politics.
Well, joining me in the studio today is activist Zita Holborn and comedian Ava Vidal. They are both involved with planning a demonstration outside the American Embassy this weekend in solidarity with Trayvon Martin. We're also joined on the phone from California by Edgar Hopida, a Director of Communications for the Council of American Islamic Relations in San Diego. Zita, let me ask you first. How widespread now is the outrage, do you think, in the United States about what's happened in both these cases?
Well, good afternoon, John. I think actually it is completely widespread. It's across the United States, and I think it's quite right that it should be, because people need to join in solidarity and stand up against what's happening. In terms of the law that allows individuals to shoot somebody dead and then be protected within the law, so no justice comes through and they're not arrested, they're not charged, is atrocious. it means that anybody, could become a victim at any moment, and that's really dangerous. So I think actually it needs a global response, not just a USA-wide response.
Let me bring Edgar in from San Diego. Thanks very much for joining us. At eye level there on the ground, what's your feeling about the relationship between these two killings?
Well, we have to be careful first that we do not assume that the death of Alawadi is a hate crime. The police department is still early in their investigation. There are some indications that it might be hate crime, but it hasn't been conclusively said that it is. So we should be very careful. We are asking for people, if they know anything, to please report any new leads to the police department so we can get this case solved.
Let me just ask you about that then, because some viewers may be surprised to hear that, given the nature of the note that we understand was left by the body. Is that not reason enough to make that assumption, or not?
Well, based on yesterday's press conference with the alcohol and police chief, they did confirm that a threatening note was found by the body of the victim, but they did not divulge or confirm if the contents of it matched the earlier reports that they're told to go back to their country and that she was a terrorist. So there is no confirmation that that's what the note actually said. The police have been very mum about it. So we can't really conclude that it's a hate crime yet until more investigation is done.
Okay. Ava, let me just bring you in here. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable reaction we saw from the guy there on the clip, saying that, basically guilty of wearing a hoodie. I mean, that's an astounding reaction. Do you know if that's very widespread?
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of generalisations that people make. I think Geraldo Rivera was absolutely wrong in what he said. And it's just something that frustrates me when you see another person of colour who kind of makes an outrageous statement like that and tries to back it up with, oh, well, I've told my son. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
And you've been involved in initiating the demonstration here. Do you have a sensation about the extent to which that outrage that's obviously widespread in the United States is also felt on this side of the pond? Well,
yeah, the reason I kind of just felt that I had to do something was my daughter's the same age as Trayvon, and he looks like my children. His features are like my children's, and I was just so distressed about it. And I've grown up seeing it and hearing it, because we're also, in the demonstration, we're doing it in solidarity with Trayvon Martin and his family, but we're also extending it to every single person that's lost someone, to any kind of lawmaker or in police custody or prison custody. And people don't want to seem to do anything about it, and our kids are dying.
Zita, I mean, Ava there was saying, it could have been her daughter. Obama made the same point, that if he had a son, it would look like this. Do you think that that it's something which is now touching a nerve about whether or not things have changed in terms of race relations in Obama's America?
I think it is. If anybody was under any illusions, but that because there was a black president of the United States, that would mean racism would go away, then, they were living in a dream world as far as I'm concerned, because what's happening on the ground, what's happening in communities, what's happening in terms of economic crisis and discrimination in the workplace and, in society at wide, it's still there. Those things haven't gone away. Those things, are going to take a long time to be tackled, and it's going to need the will of not just one president, of everybody in that community, every politician, the police, the state, everybody that's involved. And I can relate exactly to what Ava's saying, because my son is 17, and I know he reports to me, like when he's been to Westfield and other shopping centres, the way he's treated and his friends are treated, if they've got a hooded top, they're just treated with disdain. They're treated with great disrespect. They're not treated like human beings, and it's unacceptable. A hooded shirt is, a fashion item. It's a piece of clothing. It's actually a very practical piece of clothing that keeps you warm and protects your head. To be demonised because you've got a top that's got a hood is absolutely unacceptable.
Ava.
Just to add quickly with this stuff with the hooded top, look, every few years it's something different. It was a baseball cap before, and then do you remember when it was the baggy jeans? Oh, those kids are up to no good. Now it's the hooded top. Let's just be honest, it's the blackface. That's what it is.
And if we go even further back, I mean, you know, how far back do you want to go? Punks, mods, rockers, you know, I mean, this is, I mean, it's unacceptable. It's an unacceptable way of not dealing with a social problem, is to say it's what these people are wearing, isn't it? It's, I mean, and that seems to, I mean, to be a justification for murder in this case. Let me bring Edgar in on this. I mean, the points that Zita was just making about race relations under Obama. Some of the film that we've seen, some of the reports we've seen, people on the demonstrations have been making these points as well. Is this for you? Is this something that's really coming to the surface in the course of the protests over this case?
Yes, I think that there's a massive problem with race relations, and you know, and just to speak about my community, the Muslim community, you know, because it's an election year, people tend to scapegoat minorities to win election points. And, you know, you saw that with the Republican presidential candidates taking pot shots on Islam and the American Muslim community. So I think I totally agree with the other panelists that it is a race problem. And people, if had it been a white person or someone else, it would have been a different situation, and the police department and everyone else would have handled it differently.
And it's an interesting thing that the whole hijabs and hoodies kind of slogan and sort of identification is going on there. Is that widespread, or is that just at the beginning? Is it now throughout the communities that there's a kind of recognition of a common cause here?
Yeah, I think there is a common cause going on. Just locally, there's a lot of rallies being planned, even across the country. There's a lot of rallies being planned where the hooded sweatshirt and the hijab has become a symbol against, you know, hate. And, you know, because, you know, unfortunately, the Muslim women here in America, I don't know about in the UK, but I know in America, have always been on the constant barrage of being harassed because they look identifiably Muslim. So I totally agree with that.
It's a very interesting thing, isn't it? That, you know, from two quite different political points, the sort of rise of Islamophobia out of the war on terror, and then the persecution of people who wear this kind of clothes, with the whole hoodies thing, and now are coming together. Interesting moment, don't you think? Powerful moment, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad it's more widespread. For me, the fight against Islamophobia has been going on for quite a while. I speak about it in my comedy. I spoke about it extensively in my Edinburgh show last year. I'm really getting tired of opening up mainstream newspapers and seeing stuff written about Muslims that's absolutely ridiculous. It's coming to the point where what I was trying to say in the show is that there's so much stuff written about Muslims, it's normal. People don't react to it anymore. So, for instance, there was a story that I read about Somalian Muslims have banned samosas because samosas are triangle, and they think that the triangle represents the Holy Trinity, therefore a samosa is a Christian, so they've banned them. I'm like, my goodness, have you seen what's happening there? They're not banning any food, right? They're in trouble, and people will just say these casual things, and I've, you know, long been trying to connect the Islamophobia and the racism, because a lot of the things that you hear said about Muslim people, about how they mistreat women, how, you know, they don't want to join in mainstream society. And I always say to my community over here, the Caribbean community, look back 15, 20 years, look back and see what they said about us. The exact same thing.
I mean, Zita, I mean, you must have, you know, very strong memories of of exactly the same kind of scapegoating, and some of the sort of lunatic stories in the press that circulate, I suppose, really from the 70s on, about you can't use a blackboard and you know, this kind of stuff. It's eerily familiar with this kind with this kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what you see, you know, following on from what you've just said, is they will claim that it's political correctness gone mad, and then use that to scapegoat black people. And I think it is important that all the struggles of people that are so-called minority ethnic come together. And as a community activist and a trade union activist, we use the term black as a political term that encompasses everybody who's non-white and who is oppressed and suffering from discrimination. And I think it's important to have that solidarity across the board and for us to work together, because, you know, it was Caribbean people when my mum came to this country, you know, then it's West African people, then it's Muslim people, it's Jewish people, people. So, you know, it's been throughout history in the UK, they've targeted all different ethnic groups. And after they've targeted one, they're going to go for the next ethnic group. So there's no point in us dividing, and it would be wrong for us to divide. We're stronger together collectively. So I think, you know, the hijab and hoodies thing that's going on in America is a positive development to bring everybody together who is oppressed and who faces discrimination, because they're going to be stronger together, and it's going to be easier to fight that oppression if they stand together.
Edgar, just let me ask you about that. How far down the road has that kind of unity got now? Is it just at the level of a slogan now, or is there a more fundamental coming together on the demonstrations, a more kind of fundamental unity in the communities? What stage of development are we at here?
Well, I've seen a big outpouring of various organizations, interfaith groups. I've been receiving floods of emails from people that are not even Muslim that say, "What can I do to support? How we should hold a rally? You want to participate in our rally that honors both victims?" You know, so we're having a total outpouring of support from all quarters. So I don't think it's just a fad right now. I think it's becoming a real good trend. And I think people are just fed up with the hate that's going on in society. And so I think it's a positive development, and it's just the beginning of it. I'm still getting emails from my BlackBerry about what can we do to support, the families of these victims.
So, I mean, potentially something quite significant and quite important is coming out of these tragedies. I mean, I think I remember being at a meeting in the summer, Zita, that you were at, where I think it was Lee Jasper who said, the black community would like to thank the Muslim community for holding open the space of most hated minority, but now the riots, we're back. And now it was a joke, but it pointed to the kind of movement of the scapegoating between the two communities. If there's something fundamental now happening about the unity here, that can be a powerful moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Is this, in terms of the mobilisation for the demonstration on Saturday, is there an attempt also to get some of the mosques and some of the Muslim communities involved in that?
I'm reaching out to them, yes. I've, because I've spoken about it in shows. I've done things like Ramadan radio and stuff, so I'm in touch with a lot of people. This idea was actually put together on Friday. And then on Friday I was just like, I've had enough of this, I've got to do something. And I started to sort of Facebook people, and I was like, should we do a demonstration? They were all like, and I was clicking like, and I was like, okay, there's going to be a demonstration. And then started getting more and more involved, and I called Merlin and called Zita, and then we called other different organisations. And I do think that what Edgar had said also about the political atmosphere as well is very, very important, because David Cameron had gone, when we've got our own Prime Minister going around the world going, oh, yes, multiculturalism doesn't work. My joke about it is just because you've got no black friends doesn't mean it doesn't work. You're making an atmosphere, it's very charged and very, difficult for us to live in. And I've been watching some of the GOP debates in America, and it's, you're hearing people go, there's no such thing as a Palestinian, and you're just like, oh my God, what on earth is this about? This is just not fair.
Zita, just give us the details of the demonstration as well, so viewers know.
It's on Saturday outside the USA Embassy in London, just off Bond Street, and it's 1:30 to 4, and there'll be speakers, there'll be some poetry, music, and we're calling on everybody. It's not just for black people, Muslim people, anybody, it's everybody to come together and be there, as many people as possible, to bring their family, bring the children, bring their colleagues, bring their comrades, bring everybody with them, and asking people if they can to wear a hoodie, bring a packet of Skittles, although really we shouldn't be giving the business to the company that makes Skittles. It's symbolic of where Trayvon was at the time his life was taken from him. But what's also relevant is all the deaths in custody and at the hands of the police that we've seen here in the UK, and the situation with Mark Duggan, and the idea that there may not even be an inquest, which is absolutely outrageous. So on Saturday, myself, Ava, all of us will be standing up, not just for justice for Trayvon, but for justice for all of those people who have been abused by the police, who've whose lives have been taken, and the families who have just been disregarded and disrespected by the judicial system and the police system in this country.
Well, it's an important message, given that I think today it looks as if the inquiry into Mark Duggan's death in Tottenham may not proceed. So, important moment here. Edgar, just let me get a final word from you. If there's something you'd like to say to people on this side of the Atlantic about these deaths and about an appropriate reaction to them, what would it be?
Sure. We're in total appreciation that there's people outside the United States that are advocating for these victims, because just the total outpouring internationally. And I'm really appreciative of the guests who are organizing these protests and organizing rallies in support of the two victims. We're really appreciative. It seems like we're more of a global community rather than just an isolated backyard incident. It's become a very global community, and I thank you for that.
And Ava, just in terms of the impact that Trayvon's death, I think in particular, which had probably the most publicity over here. I mean, I guess part of it is simply at an emotional level, because it was such an obvious injustice. I mean, he's a young man, totally unarmed, pursued. His pursuer is told to stop pursuing him, continues to, and shoots him dead. It's a tragedy, but it's a very, very graphic illustration of where the problem lies, isn't it?
Yeah, but, the thing about that is, with Trayvon's murder, what I think has just got everybody up and going is just a lot of mothers. I think what it's done is the same thing that happened in the case of Stephen Lawrence, where just ordinary people just said, no way, absolutely, even before, colour comes into it, just parents, people who've got sons, brothers, nephews that age have just all stood up and said, no way, it's unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of gut impact of it. And when you have a case like that, it highlights exactly how much is wrong with the system, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's horrifying, because it could be us, it could be our children, it could be our niece or nephew, and that's like a really scary thought. And I think that, not wanting to scare people into coming, but that's the reason why anybody and everybody should come, because if anybody thinks it's not about us, I've heard comments, but it's happening in the States, it's about their legal system, it's nothing to do with us here. Well, actually, global solidarity is about everybody across the world, because when you have global solidarity, you heighten awareness of issues that are going on, you bring attention to that issue, and you put the pressure on the people that need to bring about that justice and do the right thing when the whole world is looking at that situation, and it's clear that the whole world is going to respond to that situation. It does make a difference. That's why it's important. And I think we should thank Ava for initiating this idea of us having a protest here in the UK.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. You'll be able to find details of this weekend's demonstration in London and the other protests we've mentioned on our Twitter page after the show. Please also let us know what you think about the issues that we've talked about today on this programme. You can find us at Eyewitness Comment. Until next week, goodbye.